Have you ever noticed how emotional lack of control doesn't start when the chart shoots against you, but much earlier? Sometimes it has already begun in the silence of anticipation, in that small knot in your stomach before the entry. You look at the price, feel the imminent click of the mouse, and your heart speeds up. In that instant, something inside you has already stopped observing the market and started being observed by it. What was supposed to be analysis turns into survival. You're no longer trading, you're reacting. And the worst part is that you don't even notice. Emotional lack of control is the breaking point between the trader and their own awareness. That's where the market stops being a chart and becomes a mirror. Each candle becomes a reflection of what you still haven't learned to master. Anxiety, fear, pride, the desire to be right. And it's in that reflection that many get lost, because it's not the market that provokes you. It's you provoking yourself through the market. The amateur trader believes that controlling emotions means not feeling them. The professional understands that control is acting with clarity even while feeling everything. It's the difference between the pilot who flies into the storm hoping the sky will clear and the one who has learned to fly inside it. That is the mindset of a winning trader in the face of lack of control. Not seeking peace in the chart, but building peace within yourself. Lack of control doesn't come from the loss itself. It comes from the internal conflict between what you planned and what you feel. You create a rational plan, entry points, targets, stops, and at the same time nurture an irrational desire to win fast, to prove something, to erase a previous loss. When the price moves, these two forces collide, and it's in that invisible impact that you lose yourself. You're not fighting against the chart, you're fighting against yourself. This is the point where dopamine dominates discipline. Every price movement releases small doses of expectation. You become addicted to micro rewards. It's no different from someone pulling the lever on a slot machine. They're not seeking profit, they're seeking relief. The market turns into an emotional casino, and every click is a request for anesthesia. The problem isn't the trade, it's the addiction to feeling something every second. Lack of control is a form of escape, and every escape has an original pain. Maybe yours comes from the need to be right because you were taught that being wrong is failure. Maybe it comes from the fear of losing because money has always represented security. Maybe it comes from haste because you never learned to wait. The market doesn't create your traumas, it just exposes them brutally. And the more you try to hide what you feel, the more it forces you to look. Every time you break your plan, you train your brain to believe that momentary relief is more important than consistent results. You create an identity of survivor, not strategist, and over time that becomes the pattern. You start trading to feel, not to win. The chart becomes an emotional battlefield where the goal is no longer to beat the market, but to escape from yourself. The amateur trader seeks control over the price. The professional seeks control over the mind. That is the frontier that separates the game of those who survive from the game of those who destroy themselves. The amateur wants to dominate the unpredictable. The professional accepts the chaos and learns to navigate it. Because true mastery is not predicting, it's maintaining clarity even when everything goes off script. Imagine two people facing the same trade. The first enters, sees the price go against him, and moves the stop. The second enters, sees the same movement, and holds the position. The chart is identical, but the mind is different. One is reacting to pain, the other is acting according to a principle. One seeks relief, the other seeks consistency. That is the difference between a conditioned brain and a trained brain. You can study setups, patterns, and strategies for the rest of your life. But as long as you don't understand that your main asset is your emotional state, the market will keep punishing you. Because it doesn't forgive those who trade in search of validation. It doesn't reward those who want to prove something. The market is not a judge, it is a mirror. And those who can't stand the reflection break in front of it. Many traders live trapped in the cycle of almost hold the trade to the target, almost respect the stop, almost trust the plan. And that word, almost, is the graveyard of all your opportunities. Every time you almost do the right thing, you reinforce the belief that doing the right thing is optional, and that destroys the foundation of consistency. The mind loses the sense of hierarchy, the plan stops being law and becomes a suggestion. But lack of control has a greater invisible price than the financial one, the erosion of self-confidence. Because after every emotional breakdown comes regret. You swear you'll change. You promise that next time will be different. And for a few days it even is. But then the cycle starts again. Because what you're trying to change is the behavior when what needs to change is the identity. The uncontrolled trader doesn't suffer from lack of technique, but from lack of mastery over who he is when he feels fear. And there's a detail that few notice. Lack of control is not always shouting, banging on the table, or trading like crazy. Sometimes it's the silence disguised as coldness. It's looking at the chart and feeling nothing, but inside being in collapse. It's that trader who says, "I'm calm," but in reality is numb. That is also lack of control, because true balance is not absence of emotion, it is presence of awareness. The winning mindset begins when you understand that the market will not adapt to your emotional state. It's you who needs to adapt to its nature. Price doesn't care about your mood, your debt, your history, or your hope. It is neutral. Who distorts neutrality is the mind that projects fear and desire onto something that never had intention. The market doesn't provoke you, it just moves, and it's in that movement that you reveal who you really are. In every trade, there is an invisible choice. You can react or you can observe. Reaction is automatic, the reflex of the past. Observation is awareness, the ability to see the impulse and still choose the plan. That is what differentiates the ordinary trader from the mature trader. The time between stimulus and response. The shorter the time, the more the market controls you. The longer, the more you control yourself. Lack of control is born from haste, and haste is the mask of insecurity. You want immediate results because you doubt you can sustain them in the long term. You want profits today because you don't believe in yourself tomorrow. That is the emotional root of almost every mistake in trading, the lack of confidence in your own process. You want to skip steps because you're afraid time will expose you. But the irony is that time is the only real ally you have. The winning trader doesn't seek quick gains. He seeks construction. He understands that every decision is a brick in the castle of consistency. He doesn't need to prove anything to anyone because he has learned that true respect comes from patience. The amateur wants to be right now. The professional wants to stay alive later. When the market tests you, and it always tests, what's at stake is not the money, it's your response. Because the chart only measures how much you have learned to govern yourself. The real profit is not in the balance, but in the serenity. Victory begins when you stop seeking control over the unpredictable and start controlling the predictable yourself. But the problem is even deeper. Because emotional lack of control is not just a punctual reaction, but a pattern of identity. You may believe you're just having a bad day, but in reality, you're repeating an unconscious cycle of self-sabotage. The brain, conditioned to immediate relief, has learned to trade consistency for comfort. It doesn't want results, it wants dopamine. And the market, merciless, offers that drug in perfect doses. Fear, hope, excitement, and despair, all within minutes. You say you want freedom, but you remain prisoner of your own impulse. And that is what destroys most traders. The inability to remain at peace within uncertainty. You want control over something that will never be controllable, and by trying to control the uncontrollable, you lose dominion over the only element that really matters. You. The uncontrolled mind is like a navigator who changes the rudder with every wave. Every candle that moves becomes a new decision. Every price variation redefines your plan. The trader loses the notion of context because emotion erases strategic memory. The market becomes a sequence of impulses, and reasoning turns into reactivity. And reactivity is the antithesis of consistency. Notice, when you lose control, it's not because the market surprised you. It's because you didn't accept what it showed. Lack of control is born from denial. You refuse the loss, refuse the mistake, refuse the time. The mind tries to resist reality, and that resistance creates tension. Price just mirrors what you still haven't accepted within yourself. But there is a brutal detail. The more you try to get rid of the pain, the more it grows. The human mind was not made to eliminate emotions, but to go through them. The mature trader understands this. He doesn't seek peace through control, but through acceptance. He knows that price will go up and down and that serenity doesn't depend on that. Serenity comes from knowing that he doesn't need to prove anything to anyone, not even to himself, through an isolated result. You may believe you are trading to make money, but in truth, you are trying to heal something deeper. Every trade is an attempt to fill the void between who you are and who you believe you should be. The trade that works gives you identity. The one that goes wrong steals your sense of worth. And that's why lack of control hurts so much, because it threatens the ego, not the account. True transformation begins when you realize that the market owes you nothing. It doesn't exist to validate you. It is just a neutral field where your level of consciousness manifests. Profit is not reward, it is reflection. Consistency is not technique, it is character. A winning trader is not the one who eliminates emotions, but the one who has learned to interpret what he feels. When he feels fear, he understands that fear is just the brain trying to protect him from a past memory. When he feels anger, he understands that it is the ego reacting to the frustration of not being in control. He observes but does not identify. He feels but does not react. Meanwhile, the amateur trader thinks the problem is the setup, the time, the broker, the spread, but the real mistake is thinking you can escape yourself by changing the environment. Lack of control goes with you wherever you go because it's not in the chart, it's in your mind. And that's where the great illusion arises, believing that discipline is a skill. It isn't. Discipline is a state of clarity. When you know what you want, understand what you need to do, and accept the process, acting with discipline becomes natural. Lack of control, on the other hand, is always a sign of confusion. You don't trust the plan because you don't trust yourself. You look for shortcuts because you believe you won't endure the long path. Every trade is a test of identity. The market asks, who are you, when the result contradicts you? And the answer defines your future. Because it's easy to act right when everything goes right. The challenge is to remain intact when chaos calls you. The mature trader chooses the plan even when it hurts. The amateur chooses relief even knowing he will regret it. But there is an even more subtle trap: the pride of self-control. Many traders believe that mastering emotions is being cold, robotic, impassive. But true mastery is not becoming a machine. It is remaining human, conscious, and balanced within imperfection. You don't need to kill emotions, you need to educate them. The trader who denies what he feels accumulates pressure, and one day that pressure explodes. That's why the winning trader learns to create space between feeling and acting. He allows fear to speak, but does not allow it to decide. He observes the impulse and instead of obeying, questions it. It is in that pause that power is born. That fraction of a second between instinct and action is where freedom lives. Lack of control is absence of space. It is acting on impulse. It is having no time between thought and click. The professional expands that time. He trains himself to breathe in the middle of chaos. He understands that the chart is an illusion of movement. The real movement happens inside him. The market is a cruel mirror because it returns everything you try to hide. It shows your impatience, your arrogance, your insecurity, your fear of being wrong. It doesn't punish you. It just reveals you. And what you do with that revelation defines whether you will evolve or repeat. You can keep justifying yourself, blaming the emotional side, the market, luck. Or you can assume that lack of control is a master in disguise. It exists to teach you what you still don't master. It is the thermometer that measures the distance between the trader you are and the trader you want to be. The professional doesn't run from lack of control. He studies it. He observes the triggers, the sensations, the patterns. He understands that every collapse is a call to awareness, and the more he knows himself, the less power the market has over him. Because the market only dominates those who don't understand themselves. Maturity arrives when you stop asking how to control the market and start asking, how can I control myself within it? That simple inversion changes everything. You stop being a victim of chaos and become part of it, navigating with purpose. But there is still a deeper layer. The emotional identity you bring to trading. The trader's mind is not born on the chart. It is built throughout an entire life. Every belief about money, success, and worthiness shapes the way you react to the market. If long ago you were taught that money is hard to earn, you will feel guilt when you profit. If you were taught that making a mistake is failing, you will feel shame for a loss. And the market, being a perfect mirror, will amplify those beliefs until you face them. That's why trading is more than technique. It is self-knowledge in its most brutal form. It exposes what you still haven't healed. It puts a mirror in front of your weaknesses and asks without mercy, do you still want to be free? Because financial freedom without emotional freedom is just a more comfortable prison. And that's why so many make money and lose their sanity. You need to understand, emotional lack of control is proof that you are still operating from fear, not from vision. Fear of losing, fear of being wrong, fear of being left behind. Each of these fears makes you make premature decisions, cut profits early, move stops, increase lot size out of turn. And in the end, what was supposed to be a profession turns into an internal battlefield. But the winning trader sees fear differently. He understands that fear is just a signal, not an enemy. It is the warning that there is something inside him that needs to be reorganized. When fear arises, he observes. He doesn't try to silence the voice, but to decipher it, because fear carries information. It shows where there is attachment, where there is lack of confidence, where there is need for control. This is the point where most separate. The amateur fights against fear. The professional learns from it. The amateur denies emotions. The professional integrates them. He knows that emotions are not obstacles, they are instruments of self-perception. Lack of control only exists when you lose awareness that you are feeling. And what is the mindset of a winning trader in the face of emotional lack of control? It is the mindset of someone who observes himself before reacting. Of someone who understands that the chart is not against him, it just exposes him. Of someone who realizes that it is not the price that brings him down, but the ego that wants to be right. A winning trader is not driven by daily results, but by internal progress. He measures success not by the balance, but by the level of calm he maintains in the face of chaos. Every loss is an emotional report. Every victory is a test of humility. Because consistency is not made of profits, it is made of balance. The ordinary trader asks, how can I earn more? The mature trader asks, how can I lose better? That is the difference between those who seek control and those who seek awareness. Losing well is accepting the risk, respecting the plan, and keeping the mind clean. Winning well is not letting pride corrupt the process. You need to understand something essential. The market doesn't defeat you. You defeat yourself every time you choose to react instead of observe, every time you seek revenge instead of learning, every time you give in to euphoria instead of patience. The real enemy is not on the screen. It is between the keyboard and the chair. And there is a phrase that should be engraved on every trader's monitor. The market does not reward those who feel too much, but those who act correctly despite what they feel. That is the foundation of emotional maturity. You don't need to eliminate fear, just learn to act in the midst of it. Every trade is a small war between instinct and awareness. And every time you defeat the impulse, you accumulate compound interest of self-control. That is the invisible currency of consistency. While the amateur seeks to double the account, the professional doubles patience. While the amateur chases gains, the professional collects self-control. In the long term, that is what separates those who survive from those who disappear. Emotional lack of control has a cruel characteristic. It always seems logical in the moment. You move the stop just a little because this time it will come back. You close the profit early just for safety. They are micro-rational lies that hide a raw emotion, the fear of feeling pain. And the more you protect pain, the more it governs you. The winning trader does the opposite. He faces pain as part of learning. He understands that every legitimate loss is an investment in clarity. He doesn't try to anesthetize himself. He tries to understand. He accepts the discomfort of seeing the price move against him because he knows that emotional control grows in friction. The mind that seeks comfort never evolves. You may wonder, but how to stay calm in the midst of so much chaos? The answer is simple, but hard to live. Trust in the process. Trust is not absence of doubt. It is deciding to follow the plan even when the body screams to give up. It is understanding that consistency is not an emotional state. It is a rational decision repeated 1,000 times until it becomes natural. And that decision has a price. Patience. Patience is the most underestimated muscle in trading. It is the opposite of dopamine. It is the power to wait without getting distracted. It is the gift of not acting when everything in you wants to react. Patience is what transforms chaos into clarity, noise into opportunity. The amateur sees the market as a sprint. The professional sees it as a marathon. While the first seeks excitement, the second seeks durability. And durability is born from a mind that has learned not to destroy itself. Because trading is not about winning more, it is about losing less of yourself. The truth is that you don't need more technical knowledge. You need more emotional self-knowledge. The difference between a panicked trader and a serene trader is not in the strategy, it is in the internal state. The same chart that destroys one is the one that builds the other. A winning trader looks at the chart and sees a field of probabilities. An uncontrolled trader looks and sees a field of threats. The difference is not in the price, but in perception. And perception is the fruit of mindset. The winning mindset is silent. It doesn't seek applause, doesn't need to prove anything. It just executes. It understands that the market is not a place to be admired, but to be understood. And understanding the market is deep down understanding yourself. You need to stop looking for the perfect trade and start looking for the you who can follow the imperfect plan without getting lost. Because the market will never be perfect. What can be perfect is your ability to remain lucid within the imperfect. When you master that, lack of control will cease to be a threat and will become a signal. Every time it appears, you will recognize it as a reminder. There is still something to be aligned. And in that instant, you will no longer react. You will breathe. And in that breath, there will be power. In the end, the market is not an enemy. It is a mirror that invites you to evolve. Every legitimate loss is a teacher, every balanced victory is a test, and every moment of lack of control is a chance to mature. The mindset of a winning trader in the face of emotional lack of control is simple, but rare. He understands that stability does not come from the absence of storms, but from the ability to remain firm during them. The market does not reward the smartest nor the fastest. It rewards those who endure the mirror long enough to recognize their own image without fear. And when that day comes, you will no longer need to fight against lack of control because it will have become your greatest teacher.